Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat, and we have come to this time of year finally. We are at the end of 2022, so it is time for my annual list of the best and worst things to happen to Toonami in 2022. But today's video will be just the worst, top 5 worst things to happen to Toonami this year. And it's basically simple. I list in reverse order from 5 to 1 the worst things to happen to Toonami from January 1st, 2022 to, as of me making this, December 19th, 2022. Without further ado, let's start the list. Number 5 worst thing to happen to Toonami this year was not getting Made in Abyss Dawn of the Deep Soul. This is kind of low on the list because I think how this season has gone so far, you could kind of get away with not having watched it. But again, like you had moments like this most recent episode where you had Rico holding the white whistle and then a girl behind her told her to blow it. You might be wondering who that girl was. That girl was Prushka, and she was very important to Dawn of the Deep Soul. And the fact that she has this personal connection of Rico is more or less explained in that movie. So if you didn't watch that, this seems kind of like a weird pull, like a weird, oh, this was something they're doing to keep the plot moving or to save Ma or find some way to summon Reg back to Ilbu. But there is a reason why things worked out this way. Also, the fact that she had the white whistle in the first place, where it came from. But really, Dawn of the Deep Soul was an amazing movie. And it gets better the more and more I think about it. And they do reference it too, with the scene with Bondrewd saying the white whistle essentially is just, oh, it helps people recall what their true purpose is. And that's important to explain why Reg immediately went back to the village, like instantaneously. And other things too, like there's one thing that'll probably come up later that hadn't come up this season with Reg having a limited amount of incinerator moves, blasts that he's able to use. As of the end of the movie, it's at 10. However, he can't even use it right now because it's still removed from his body and it is attached behind Rico. And you might have seen that a couple times that she carries on her back. I think she mentioned it once too at one point. And outside of that, you get kind of more characterization of Nanachi. You get an explanation of what his role in a Bondrewd's compound was, which is very terrifying if you watched it. And something that hasn't been as much important. And that's why this is kind of low on the list. Because although I think it might hinder one's experience watching Made in Abyss Season 2, it's not entirely gonna throw you off. So that's why it's at number 5. Number 4 worst thing to happen to Tom this year was the frequent doubling up of shows and the cutting of block length. If I recall correctly, at the start of the year, Toonami was 5 hours. It is now at 3 hours. It is a block from midnight to 3 a.m. And yeah, and that's always a scary sign or scary thing when Toonami shrinks. I think Toonami hasn't been this short since maybe 2015, if I recall correctly, when it was only 3 hours. I mean, 2018, we had a 7-hour long block. Admittedly, that was a very clunky block that was doing absolutely miserably in ratings, but it showed that they had budget. They had money to get things. They had Hunter x Hunter. They had Black Clover. Both of those shows people definitely took for granted when it was on Toonami. And if you had a show like that come back again, I think people will kind of like that again. People would clamor for it, although they haven't made more Hunter x Hunter. And I know they've restarted, I believe, making Black Clover again, I recall correctly, in Japan. But they slowed down at one point because the manga, they were catching up to the manga where they were. But again, and we also had, well, that was the weird year. We had 2 Fully Cooley sequels, like 2023, we're gonna have 2 more Fully Cooley sequels. We had Dragon Ball Super. We had darn, what was the other Dragon Ball Kai? The other dragon, like there's 2 Dragon Balls out at the same time. Like it was a smorgasbord, and it showed that they had money to go out and get those things. The fact that we're at 3 hours, and the fact that we had multiple times, we had Naruto double up. We had One Piece double up for the longest time after coming back to the block. Although you can make good arguments why One Piece should be double up with how slow the pace of that show is. At the same time, it's a sign that they're really, really blatantly trying to stretch out what has probably been a shrunken budget. And more on the reasons for that shrunken budget when we get a little further up on that list. Wink, 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 wink. When we get to number 3 now, that is the fact that we keep hitting these schedules late. For example, it used to be the old standard was 10 or 11 days before that Saturday, if there was a schedule change, we would know about it. Multiple times we've gotten schedule changes or late announced marathons like the week of. And again, one might say it's due to some legalese thing to do with them, just waiting for the ink to dry on the contracts or NDAs. At the same time, those are things that were apparent years ago as well. And right now, I feel like it's a lot of this is them scrambling around with a minimalist budget and them trying to find, okay, what show can we do a marathon of? What shows haven't we done marathons of? Which licenses can we get? Are we sure we can get this show again? And more often than not, the answer has been no to that. Although for certain things, and certain things I will probably talk about my best, I will talk about because I'm looking at both lists right now in front of me. My best of list will talk about some moments where we have been able to get shows that we've wanted, wink, 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 to that list. But at the same time, it looks bad. And of course, when you talk about everything wrong this year, a lot of these things tie up with the whole Warner's Brothers Discovery merger, where there was a lot of chaos, and that probably played a big role in the budget being probably slashed. Although Toonami, I think, was far and away spared from the worst things, especially if you look at what happened to, say, TBS or TNT. Both of those got absolutely railed by the merger. I think both of those networks are going to have no new scripted programming outside of TBS having American Dad because it already had like a 2-year contract that Warner Bros. Discovery could not get out of because of Seth MacFarlane. So expect these next 2 seasons to be the last 2 seasons of American Dad, even if Seth MacFarlane wanted to make more. Unless they somehow are able to make it no longer a TBS original, get it back to Fox or something. Fox seems content with the Great North and shows like that too, so I don't think that's going to happen unless there's some weird sweetheart deal in the works. But again, number 3 was not getting schedules on time, getting them very late, especially with marathons. Number 2 is an old standard on this list, and that is Uzumaki being delayed once again. Although, to be fair, there's fair explanation about this. And I could tell this from 2.5 years ago at this point, where we had that, where they had Toonami be like an anime expo panel on TV, where they would show these little like snippets of trailers or really just interviews with creators of new upcoming anime. That's when we figured out, when we learned about Fena Pirate Princess, stuff like that. Wink, wink is what happens with number 1, but we learned about that. And the Uzumaki one always struck me odd because the first thing announced that night was, oh, we have this new show called Fena Pirate Princess that's coming out soon. But then the further we went along, we had other announcements, but nothing at all regarding Uzumaki, which is weird because at this point, Uzumaki was already being played up to be the next big thing that Toonami has. And then when the time came around, we got the same exact teaser trailer we had like a year prior. And then we had an interview with the director where he was like, even straight up said, yeah, it's harder than we thought to do this animation. We're gonna shoot for the moon and the stars. It was more than we thought. It's at least gonna be twice as hard than we thought. And right there, I'm like, okay, he's talking about how we're gonna get shifted back a year. And then like right after that, like Uzumaki delayed. Not, they didn't say delayed. Uzumaki coming in 2021. And you know how that turns out if you look to the calendar and realize that we're currently in December of 2022, that Uzumaki, in fact, did not come out in 2021. Back then, it was blamed on COVID. And then the last couple delays have been, well, the animation's just hard. And then we got like an actual trailer come out in the meantime, which was absolutely beautiful. So at least they're definitely putting the effort in. And I'll give them full credit for that. And at this point, it has turned into Adult Swim's Chinese democracy. Maybe we do get in 2023, and at some point we have to eventually actually do get a finished product. And it's only 4 episodes long, so it's not like we're making like a One Piece like thing here, but I digress, you know? And now, before I hit the number 1 worst thing to happen to Toonami 2022, I'm going to go over really just the one honorable mention, and that is the poor ratings throughout the year. And this isn't a dum-dum, I guess, to, if you recall, my 2021 list. Worst thing happened to Tommy 2021 was Adult Swim losing Family Guy because it killed the ratings. it was a week to week thing from the last Family Guy week to the first week without Family Guy. Toonami's ratings fell 50%. That's frightening. It's kind of scary to see, how much the block was being buoyed upward. And recently, not really that recently, it appears that this strategy that Adult Swim is using to prop up Toonami is to change the lead into, I guess, the most fitting show that's the most closely Toonami related in Rick and Morty. And I guess because, Primal's now kind of technically in a Toonami show, but not. It's Toonami when we get reruns of season 2. When Adult Swim says it's not, then it's just an Adult Swim show. And in all the promos and stuff, it's an Adult Swim show. So Primal's an Adult Swim show we threw on Toonami. At least it fit more like a glove. The glove fit better than, say, 2020 when we had to pretend that Jimuseto was a Toonami show. When we had to play that Ball Masters was a Toonami show. That was a scary year. Okay, this year's shows were not as bad as 2020. Okay, because we didn't have to get that desperate. Or like the end of 2021 where they straight up admitted they had no money left for this year, so it was just throwing marathon after marathon and pretending that people wanted more and more Blade Runner. And like we had, I think that was actually an Adult Swim marathon where they just straight up showed 2049, and it was like the day after that was like another Blade Runner marathon. And I digress, that's just really that's not the type of thing you really want to see. And again, and that's something that kind of plagued this year, but it was too general a thing for me to really put on this list. It would have been lame to throw it on this list of me saying something I say like every other week or so in my weekly ratings video, like, oh, the ratings were bad this week. Like, yeah, but there's been some other times the ratings have been decent. Like couple weeks, My Hero Academia has really done wonders for the block. Wink, wink towards my next video, the best of list video. And Primal did all right. Even Shenmue did all right. Oh, and I'm going to mention Shenmue in number 1. And I think if you followed Toonami this year, I'm going to go into number 1 right now. If you followed Toonami this year, there is absolutely no surprise what the number 1 worst thing was. It was Warner Brothers Discovery just going ham with write-offs. Went ham all over the place with basically anything that Warner Brothers was related with. They wrote off Warner Brothers. They wrote off its brother. They wrote off its sister. They wrote off its cousin. They wrote off Charles Lindbergh's baby for some reason, I guess. I don't know. That's a joke, But yeah, and Toonami got hit too. Although Toonami, I did say earlier, was relatively spared, it wasn't completely spared. If you said going into 2021, oh, by the way, the 3 new originals you're getting this next year or so, well, except for Uzumaki, which you're not going to get by the year and a half from now, yeah, they're all going to be written off for tax purposes. You would have thought I was joking. But no, I'm not. A number 1 worst thing, Fena, Shenmue, Blade Runner, among other things, getting written off. And again, these are shows that, 2 out of 3 cases I think had a general positive reception. Take out the last few episodes, I think people really enjoyed Fena. I think people, at least the fans of like the game Shenmue, seem to enjoy it. And I actually heard a little buzz about Shenmue outside the typical Toonami sphere of things. Blade Runner Black Lotus was shit on by everyone. It wasn't as hard shit on to say Fooly Cooly because people have more fond memories of Fooly. I think when people heard Fooly Cooly was getting sequels years ago, people were going to be like, people said, oh, they had like hope that it would be good. They might be like, well, it might not be good as original, but it might be good. I think when people heard that they were making Blade Runner Black Lotus, people were like, oh, these people think they're Ridley Scott now. This is going to suck. And this is on the backs of a sequel movie that really was I'll say better received than the average. 30 years later, we're making another remake than the average movie. I know people have strong opinions about 2049. I feel like they weren't generally as negative as for like the Ghostbusters reboot from 6 years ago or so. Which, oh yeah, that movie actually totally sucked. But I digress. Worst thing, Shenmue, Blade Runner, Black Lotus getting written off. Written off for tax purposes means we are not seeing that again. We can't I think there's certain things about you can't buy it online. You can't do all these different things. You definitely can't air it on TV again. And I believe that's what Cartoon Network back in the day did for several other shows. I believe they did this for Young Justice. I know they definitely did it for Symbiotic Titan, which pissed me off because I love Symbiotic Titan way back when. Real kids remember 2010. Real kids remember 2010 when people were talking about, yeah, the new triumvirate of Cartoon Network. It's gonna be Symbiotic Titan, Adventure Time, and regular show. Two of those three things absolutely took off and became massive. The other one was the one I liked the most. But again, and a lot of people are frustrated. Like half these, you can literally say half this list is just Warner Brothers Discovery being dicks. Yeah, you can make a good point. Like if you wanted to make this just a one item long list, just say Warner Brothers Discovery happened and you would make a point. But again, to sum up the list, number 5, not getting down to the deep soul. Number 4, cutting the block / doubling up shows. Number 3, getting our schedules late. Number 2, Uzumaki being delayed for the 9,000th time. And number 1, Fena, Shenmue, and Blade Runner Black Lotus getting written off. What are your opinions? What other things do you think really sucked on Toonami this year? Hopefully, in the next couple days, I will do my best of list and release that. So, with love, I am Super Orange Cat, and that is all.